Hi, I'm Randy at B&W Equipment Repair, co-owner of bnwparts.com. I'm going to show you pipeline guys how to test a Magneto. One thing all you guys need to have in your toolbox is a paper clip or a spark tester. I've got the paper clip in there, I've got it into the cap, I've got it facing toward one of the grounding bolts on the dust cover. What you do is you just turn the Magneto and you're looking for a purple spark. If you do not have a purple spark with a distance of about 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch, the Magneto is not putting out any power. So you're going to have it rebuilt. This one does not have any blue spark or any purple spark. It's got to be rebuilt. I'm going to show you how to rebuild that right now. In case you weren't able to see a good view of how this is set up as far as to check the Magneto, this is a better shot. Also, you can do this on the welder, so you don't have to take it off. Just move your spark plug out of the way, plug this in, crank your motor over, and make sure that it sparks. If it doesn't, then there's an issue with the mag. Another good idea is to go ahead and take the grounding wire off so that you isolate it to the Magneto not making power and not a bad connection. Alright, so basically we're going to remove the cap and rotor and all of the top part and start disassembling the top part of the Magneto. On inspection, the cap is very badly worn down and it's pitted very badly, so it definitely needs to be rebuilt. If you're having trouble getting the rotor out, you can use 2 screwdrivers and just pry evenly on both sides and get the rotor to pop out evenly instead of trying to yank and pull on it with your fingers. The dust cover's next. Dust cover, all it does is just hold the cap and the rotor assembly out far enough to where it makes it convenient for the rest of the components. You can, I mean, if it's ugly and not very pretty and you're making it look good, you can replace it. But you also want to inspect it to make sure it doesn't have any major cracks in it. This one does. It has a huge cracker along this side, so we're going to replace that also. Problem with the Magneto is it's got oil in it. So basically what happened is the seal that's behind it went bad and filled the inside with oil, causing the Magneto not to be able to fire with the points. So basically we're going to take everything apart on the top, and then we're going to flip the back side over, and we're going to check to see what failed on the seal on the opposite side. There's a clip right here on top of your metal gear. We're going to pry that clip out of play. There's also another clip that's on the point set. We're going to pop that clip out also. We're going to take this screw out the back side, which is going to release all the wiring that's coming from the coil and from the condenser and from your grounding wire. So we'll release all that. Get that stuff out of the way. Now if you can't get your gear off, what you can do is you can use the 2 screwdrivers again and pry on both sides of the gear and get it to pop out of the play. You're going to have that gear off the top part of the rotor to be able to disassemble the rest of the parts. Make sure that when you're putting the screwdriver in here and you're lining it up against this to get your condenser out, that you don't snap your brand new gear. So just be careful when you're taking it off that you just turn it at an angle so that it doesn't do any damage. Your top plate is anchored in the side to keep it squared, but so when you put your new plate in, you want to make sure that you have that squared and anchored before you start your bolts. Now if you look at this points assembly that's on here, this points assembly is an aftermarket like the kind that we sell at bwparts.com. So just because it's not an exact duplicate of the original one, this still stays centered off of these bolts that stay in this assembly a certain way. So don't worry that it's not the exact part, because the exact part will cost you 4 or 5 times more than what you're paying for through BW Parts. Now if this plate won't pop out of its slot, same thing. Use 2 screwdrivers, one on one side, one on the other, and gently pry on both sides evenly until you can get it to pop out of its housing. Once it's out, and you'll see it's got a shoulder on it all the way around that lines up in that shoulder. That's what keeps it square with the rotor, so that the rotor doesn't hit at an angle. Okay, then once you get that out of the way, the next thing to do is to take these grounding screws out. Make sure when you put this back together that when you tighten those grounding screws up that it grounds really nice and solid against the coil, else the coil won't ground right and it won't produce the correct power. If you cannot get these grounding studs out, get your torch out, put your bronze or your small tip on, and just slightly heat them up. Don't heat them up to where you're going to melt all the material, but just enough to where they'll expand and contract a little bit so that you can get the studs out. Fortunately for this one, these studs look like they're not going to be an issue. Okay, this usually would just pop free. The magnetism will hold it in place a little bit, but so just wiggle it back and forth until you get it all the way out. So basically that's what you'll see on this side right here. Now we're going to go out to this side here. If you don't have a little impact, you can use just a something to hold the side right here while you're getting the center nut loose. Okay, so get the center nut loose. Make sure you inspect the parts. Make sure none of them are broke. You can grab a hold of this with your fingers. It's spring loaded. Don't worry about that. I'll show you how to put it back together when we do the reassemble. Just make sure that everything's in place. Now this places a tapered gear. You're going to have to use a puller to be able to pull that gear off. I've made one where I've grinded it down a little bit so it fits in behind the assembly. It's kind of a pain, but it's the only way you can really get that assembly off without doing any damage. Make sure when you position this pulley that you don't have it underneath any of the strikers, that it's going to actually pull evenly. If it's not lined up correctly, then reset up your assembly so that it'll pull straight.
So basically, with the tapered gear out of the way, you want to inspect to make sure that your spring levered arms are that the spring is in place and that the arms are able to move and snap back into position. So as you're taking this apart, make sure that you inspect all of your parts. Okay, so next step is you've got an outer shield that protects the seal, and then there's also one on the inside. So go ahead and pop that seal out. Once the seal is out, it'll expose the inner, or once the shim is out of the place, it'll expose the seal. The seal is nice and hard. It's probably pretty old. Then you'll have your inner seal or protector that goes around on both seals, and then you'll notice that there's a retainer clip that holds the rotor in place up next to the bearings. So when you're pulling that out, make sure that you put your fingers over this assembly so that it doesn't pop that seal or that retainer halfway across the room. Once we get that retaining clip out of the way, make sure that you don't shoot it halfway across the room, because it is spring loaded. Then we're going to take the nut and put it back on the rotor so that we don't damage the rotor while we're tapping on it with the hammer. So you're going to tap on there, but make sure that you don't hit something or break something. Just make sure that you tap on it in the center. Once you get the rotor tapped out, you can take the nut off so you can slide it out. And once you have it out of your way, that'll expose the back side of your bearing, your center bearing. Your center bearing has a retainer clip that holds it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the inside and we're going to grab that retainer clip and take it out so that we can remove the bearing. Once we get the bearing out of place, then we're going to take this assembly and get it nice and clean and prepped so that we can start doing the reassemble. So in a couple of minutes, once I get all this stuff put together, I'm going to show you how to reassemble once all these parts are cleaned and I have all of the parts that I'm going to be using that I'm going to pick up from bnwparts.com, and I'm going to do the reassembly. So that's it on the disassemble. Make sure that you inspect all your parts, and then your rotor actually will pick up all of your components so you know that your rotor is in good condition. If your coil has any cracks or any problems with the coil, make sure you replace it. There's a big old crack right through the center of this coil. This coil should be replaced. So, and that's it.